So first of all, as I said, we're welcoming you to this first session. It's going to be interactive. We're really eager and excited to see what God does this year because every year is a bit different. But let's dive into this topic for today. So right off the bat, I want to ask you this question. Who has completed a microgrant application successfully? Meaning you were given a grant based on an application that you wrote. Raise your hand. You can raise your virtual hand, or you can raise your, if you got a video on, you can raise your hand that we can all see. So I have seen a couple of people say, yeah, I have written a successful grant. Wonderful. Well, congratulations. I would love if you would be willing, anyone who has been successful, to share with us, what made it successful from your perspective, or what did you learn from that experience that you might share with the rest of us that helps people understand what makes a grant application something that a grantor would want to grant. So those of you that have been successful, we want to learn from you and your experiences. So would you please, anyone, be willing to share from your experience? Just go ahead and unmute yourself if you've got some thoughts on what helped you. I know it's our first time. People are thinking, people are shy. I know one person recently said to me, what made mine successful is I hired a grant writer. And I thought, that's a great solution if you've got the money to hire a grant writer. So yes, that is one way to do that. Anyone else, from your experience, what makes a good grant application?
Part of it for me was having uh, clearly articulating the organization, the project with the desired outputs, the desired long-term outcomes, and then having the cost structure very clear, and my ability to show that I had good accounting in place and systems.
Oh yeah, Kelly, you said a lot there, which we're going to touch on a number of those things, but I really appreciate you sharing your experience because it does take having some good, clear communication and having some things to back that communication up with something that's believable for a grantor, that they say, okay, they really know what they're doing. They have some information for us. So great example. Anyone else? And maybe you're not confident that why it made it successful, but that's okay. We're here to learn together. No one is gonna hold you accountable for your tip, but just want to make sure. I love, Steph, what you said in the chat. Ensure we have quality on every level. So that's good. Quality, clearly communicating what you do and the quality of it. So I think quality is going to show up in a lot of different things that I'll highlight today. But when you say that, Steph, when you think quality, tell me what that meant to you.
So, excuse me, I do believe in quality and excellence. What I meant is that we qualify. So there's some vagueness on a lot of the grants, especially on ones that you're not really sure what you're aiming for in terms of, what they'd actually be willing to give you. So going through and making sure we tick all the boxes before even bothering to apply.
Yeah. And if I could read right, I would have read not quality, but qualify. Thank you for that clarification. Perfect. Yes. I've got too many screens and too many things open. Sometimes I'm missing little details. So that's great. Qualify what you're saying, make it clear, make sure that you're ticking every box. Really wise, helpful.
And when you're reading the details, like what do you have, or what they want, who they want to give it to, all of the things that they list, even in the fine print on the small pages, like whether or not it's allowed to be a Christ-centered or faith-based organization, things like that.
You did a little bit of research on that. You can look at all that fine print because there is usually fine print, but they also try, many organizations will put all of that up front, don't miss it. I think that's what you're saying is make
Yes.
sure you fully understand. I love that. That's really helpful. Wisdom, good wisdom there. Anyone else want to add in? Always excited to get everyone's input, their feedback, their thoughts in this process, and then to be able to go on. So as we look at this, in terms of applications in general, many times people feel a bit intimidated about doing grant applications, particularly if you haven't done them or you haven't been successful in the past. So one of the things we want to do is help increase your confidence of what kinds of things grantors are looking for, what kinds of things to pay attention to, because our mindset really does matter. If you've got a preconceived idea that grant writing is hard and I need to hire somebody, then you might never do it and you might never try that. So it does require time and thought, as everyone has already articulated, but really, I think that the process of grant writing is so valuable because what it helps you do is it clarifies for not only outside people, but for you, how to tell people what is the work you're doing, what are the needs that you have, and probably most importantly, what's the impact you've already had. So it helps you clarify a lot. And we've heard that over and over that the microgrant process helps a lot of people clarify how to communicate their work, particularly to donors and a variety of types of donors. So that is one of the things I think that you gain from doing grant proposals. And one of the reasons I think not outsourcing it is a good practice because it'll help you be much more clear and able and confident to communicate who you are, what you do, and the impact that you're having. Oops, another person waiting room. Okay. So let's break down. I'm going to give 5 tips. I'm going to let you, add to these tips as we go through, but give us a little bit to talk about through this. And some of you have already touched on tip number 1, not necessarily saying it directly, but saying it indirectly. Know your donor. So first of all, getting that belief in your mind that you don't have to coerce anyone when you're writing a grant application. They want to give. That's why they put an application out there. They're looking for people to give to. They want to use what God's entrusted to them. Now, I'm talking primarily faith-based, Christ-centered organizations. Now, you can apply the general principle beyond that, but those who are faith-based that want to see Christ-centered kingdom work expanded, they want to use what God has entrusted them in very wise ways to make an impact with the resources God's given them. So what they're looking for is, in some ways, a grant application is like a dating app. It's like, who is this person? What do they do? What do they care about? What do they want? And are we a good fit? And so funders, they really want to know what you're doing. They want to know the real stuff. And what you're trying to do is, as you get to know them, you want to find that sweet spot between what you're doing and what they're interested in. And in most cases, you can research a foundation or grantors. You can look up who they are, where they've given, so you can figure that out. So let me ask you a question, and you can type it in the chat or you can unmute. What do we know about the microgrant, Venture 19 microgrant donor givers? What do you know about them already from what little you've already heard?
That
They
they're
are
from
faith-based.
local, yeah, faith-based, and then also local community churches and donors within the local community.
Yeah, good. Faith-based churches, individuals, family foundations. So Jonathan had that on his screen. Good. One other thing I'd say is they all know Venture 19. And so many of them have been told about the microgrant. So if you think about the microgrant and some of the things Jonathan has said, what might be some of their expectations and why they would be interested as a donor to be a part of a microgrant?
Well, if they know Venture 19, and the vision, then maybe they want to specifically partner with nonprofits that are learning how to grow or in a place of growth, development.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Because they know who we are. And that's what we're trying to do is help people grow, be more sustainable. So they're interested in that growth. So when you think about that, that helps you understand who they are, what some of the things they're interested in. What else might they know as just connected to Venture 19? And maybe even specifically the microgrant. Jonathan highlighted, why is the microgrant kind of like somebody said to us once, it's like catnip to a family foundation. Why might they be so excited to have it? So you thought I was just going to come and talk at you. Now I'm making you think. Yeah, their dollars will be leveraged. So Joe says that in the text in the chat. The dollars will be leveraged to raise more money. That's it. They're interested in, they want to use their money wisely. And if all of a sudden they find out this is going to be multiplied at least 4 times what we invest, that's going to help another organization grow its capacity. So that is really exciting for most donors. Because if I say I'm going to give away 10,000, then you use it for $10,000 worth of great work. But if I give you 10,000 and you multiply it times 2 or 4, wow, they're like, that's significant. So it is leveraging their giving. I love that the way it's said. They're also interested in capacity building. So they want to see Christian nonprofits succeed because they want to see kingdom work being done. So it's very strategic on their part. So if you think about all of that, that helps you understand who these people are. And just remember, they have read a lot of great applications. So they're looking for people that they feel like they can trust. They're people, because anyone that's got a lot of money has been asked a lot from a lot of people to give money. So they're really looking for people that they would say are trustworthy. So why is it valuable to know your donor? Because now you know you're not just filling out an application, you're trying to connect. You're trying to connect with those people. So that's number 1 tip. Make sure that you know your donor and that you're aware of who they are, what they're looking for. Second thing is following the directions. I'd say nothing kills a grant application faster than not following the posted guidelines, regulations, timeframes, directions, whatever that is. And sometimes grantors will use that simple thing about directions to eliminate, because if they put out a grant, this is not true with us because, we had 19 ministries involved in the info meeting. And, we've in the past said somewhere between 9 and 12. That's a really good possibility of getting granted, getting accepted. But in many cases, when a grantor puts out their grant application, they get lots and lots of applications. So one simple way, like you do with when someone turns in a resume, if it's not clear, it's not well written, if there's typos, they just toss it right from the very beginning. So following the directions and, making sure that when you see that there is a time frame on it or there are expectations, that you know what they are and that you follow them to the letter of the law. And that's something, Steph, you were talking about in there, which is really important. And so when I think of the microgrant, these are the 3 questions that are probably the most significant, most critical, that not only do we look at as Venture 19, but so will the donors, because there's a lot of information in the application that you've already put into your ministry snapshot. But these 3 kind of help us know what you're thinking. So what are the guidelines requirements for the microgrant? So just a reminder, just type it in or shout it out. What are the 3 things that we've really talked about that are a part of it, that are expectations, requirements to the microgrant? Think about requirements. Okay, so we'll seek existing donors to create a match. Yeah, so you're going to add to their 2,500. So that means you're going to work internally to help create a match. There's an expectation of helping to create that match by adding another 2,500. Great. Attendance to the program. Right. Awesome, Amy. Yes. Yes, non-consumable growth. So that is a non-consumable is a definition that's a very important part of this. So if you turn in an application and we ask about a non-consumable and you tell us you're going to buy backpacks for kids, then it's like, you missed that whole point of what a non-consumable is. And even though Jonathan said you can buy a pet dog, don't do it. Don't try it. That was a joke. So you're thinking
Well, I'm
about
in medical, so you know, pet therapy is a thing.
yes, that actually is true. You might be the only exception, Amy. I love that. So you'll seek new donors, Steph. You hit that. That's one, I would say that's one of the most critical is you are going to be looking to add new donors. So you're going to be creating a match and you're going to be looking for new donors, which is a minimum of, yep, they put it in there, 10. So a minimum of 10. So understanding what those expectations are and requirements are, the best way in an application is to reiterate that you understand what those are. You're clear about them. When you give your plan on these 3 questions, you want to make sure it's clear to the reader that you understand the expectations. So thoroughly review all the guidelines, all the fine print when you're submitting your application. Make sure you understand the questions, and you can always reach out almost to any foundation. And if you have questions about their application questions, they'll usually answer them ahead of time. So most people are willing, and certainly we are willing to do that. And I love, Daniel, what you said about being Christ-centered. Yes, because, and how do you know that? So Daniel, unmute yourself for a second and say, how do you know that Christ-centered is one of the requirements and expectations?
That was me who said it, but
Because we answered question number 7 thoroughly.
well, because question number 7 in application needs to be, you know, answered really thoroughly.
Yes, love it.
But also, not just that, but that's what we all call to, right?
And number
Yeah.
6, and then repeats it again. So
Mhm.
Yeah, when you see something like that highlighted, that is either an adjective, a clarifier, pay attention to it. And you're going to see that. I'm going to highlight that in one of our slides, just a couple of points ahead, because it is part of the instructions in a particular question. So excellent. You guys are on top of all of this. So jumping toward that, in terms of instructions in that question 7, there's another really important instruction. What does it say? 1 paragraph. What does that tell you? Yes, we're not rocket scientists. 1 paragraph. You know, what does that not mean? You know, well, that means don't put it in bullets, don't make 2 paragraphs, and don't write too much. So they're creating a limit on what they want to see. One of the biggest challenges we have as leaders of nonprofits, many of you are founders, you've created this, you're passionate about it, you know so much, it's hard to be short and concise. So a lot of times they will limit, sometimes they put with a maximum of 250 words. If you write 300 words and they say 250, they could easily just throw your application out, boom, you're done. So follow instructions, make sure you understand it. Sometimes these small things, you know, are the things that would lead you, particularly in bigger applications, to get passed by. They might seem small to you because you're busy and you're doing a lot of other things, but they are things that people use to just kind of, you know, go through and weed people out. And then here's that one that you just highlighted again is, and I'd say it this way, is answer the questions that are asked. Make sure that you understand what the question is. Think through how you would answer it. Don't just do it off the top of your head. But in this case, we see this question is saying, that this is Christ-centered nonprofit work. So don't miss that, because that's telling you that they want to understand not just your general work. In many cases, and some of you, you aren't even overtly Christ-centered because you can't be in your different environments. Amy, that's a good example. But in this program, because your donors want to see kingdom work expand, nobody's going to put this online. You're not going to go public with this, but you're giving it to your donor because you're trying to match their interests and yours. So be specific. Don't just tell us about your great work. Make sure you clarify, why is it Christ-centered? So tell us about your great work, but how is it doing kingdom work? How is it? Doesn't mean you have to tell how people get saved, but what does that look like? So you're trying to fit that, what the donor is looking for, what you are doing, and make sure find that sweet spot between there. Let me ask a question, because this one's asking specifically about explaining your work. On a scale of 1 to 5, just put this in the chat box. How confident are you that you can be clear, succinct, and effective in communicating what you do in a paragraph or less? So how confident are you? 1 being low, 5 being high. So I've got a lot of 5s there. Great. 4, that's still 4, 5. So this is an opportunity, and I only see a few of you. Yeah, good, good. There's more of you than put it in there. Don't be shy. This is for everybody. We're not hiding. We're going to be connected. So yeah. And so, when you're saying, this is where I'm at, this is going to help you get better at that. And I would say one of the best ways to get clear on this is try communicating it to your elderly parent, meaning someone older than you. Doesn't mean they're elderly, but try communicate to your neighbor, someone who doesn't know what you do and you're passionate, and try to do it in 3 to 4 sentences and see how that goes. Practice it, try it. This is one of those ways when you are trying to clarify who you are. I like that, Stephanie. It's harder when you're not discussing Christ-centered work. Sometimes it's even hard when you are, because you want to tell all the stories of what God has done. So, it's just finding a way to be able to be really clear. Clarity in communicating your ideas is the key to successful applications. One of the reasons that grantors make you fill out an application is because you have to put it in words. They don't have all day. They don't want to sit and meet with everybody, but they want to see it and hear it. And so that you can get clearer the more you practice this. So, you want other people to be able to understand the idea very easily. We say this, Jonathan and I, often. You don't want the people that are reading your application to expend any extra energy or any extra calories trying to understand what you're saying. In fact, one of the things we always say, don't create questions in the reviewer's mind that they didn't ask. So, if you use some acronym in what you're saying and they go, what does that mean? They're having to spend energy. And anytime you create a question that they didn't ask, now they're confused, they're frustrated, they're unsure. So if you introduce a new idea without explaining it, they're thinking, what are you talking about? I missed something. So they're trying to, if they have patience, they'll go back and try to read a little earlier, but if they don't, they move on. And worse yet, they start skimming, and then they don't, the rest of your application, they don't read it clearly. So when you think about how you say it, and if you say a definitive statement, like, 1.5, there are 1.5 million nonprofits in the United States, and they're like, is that true? How would I know that? They start to question you. You don't want to create questions in their mind. So, an easy way with that example is to say the most recent study given by Nonprofits for Good is there's 1.5 million. So you've now qualified where you got that information. So in essence, what you want to do is you just really want it to be focused, simple, clear communication. Don't require them to burn any extra mental calories at all. In that area of ask the question, answer it. Any other additional thoughts or follow the directions, those first two tips? Anyone want to jump in with something that stirred in your mind? Just unmute yourself and do it. All right. I'm always trying to get you to speak up and share what things you know, because there's a lot of wisdom in the room, definitely here. Here's an example, just to kind of give you one good example that one of the donors said this was one of their the best explanations of something they didn't understand ever before. Man in the Mirror, not a clear title, so you'd have no idea what this is about. But it says, Man in the Mirror exists to help every church help all of their men become more like Jesus. That is a great opening sentence, because there's no words in there that a donor wouldn't understand. It's all simple English, short, easy to read sentence that helps them understand this is about men that are becoming more like Jesus. So that was helpful. And then later on, as you go through, it says, we accomplish this, which is about working to build discipleship in churches. We accomplish this by serving pastors and equipping men's leaders with proven systems and tools to reach and disciple men, focusing on heart transformation opposed to behavior modification. That tells you a lot about what they're focused on. It's a complex sentence, but it's still English, easy to read. The donor said this was really helpful. They didn't know this group when they met them. They thought, oh, that's great. Oh, and look, they walk alongside churches, helping them be more effective in their ministries to men. What that did is that opened up a door in the donor's mind that not only are they doing men's discipleship, but they're helping strengthen churches. So that became, oh, that's something else I'm interested and passionate about. We provide these services at no cost to the church. I mean, at this point, the donor's like, I'm all in. So this last one, as a result of our work, this is an impact statement. The churches we serve report nearly doubling the number of men they disciple in less than 3 years. That's a great impact statement. So think about the work that you do. You know, how can you demonstrate in short sentences the impact of what you do? So easy language, what is your strategy? Simple ideas. And then impact, and then anything that you might have that's unique, whether it's walking alongside of church at no cost to church, whatever that is that makes it unique, that's what you'd want to add to it. So that's just one example. So I want to just stop for a second and say, do you have questions about any of these parts of the microgrant application? Round one, meaning, you know, your question of using current champions to build a match. Round two, using new donors to meet the $5,000 match, or around the question around $10,000 non-consumables. Anyone, just unmute yourself, be bold. If it's nagging at you, I'm guarantee it's nagging at someone else too.
So can you use new donors like in that first round to, like, I think part of our plan is might incorporate, not that that's our focus, but it might incorporate new donors that are monthly. But if they were to donate within that first round, would they still be, like, would it still apply, or would we not be able to use that donation towards the 25?
Yeah. Thank you, Amy, for being bold and asking the question in your mind. That's what I love most. And it's a good question. And as Jonathan said, we are going to often say, see who remembers, it depends. Yes, I saw that, Kelly. She says it. She said, I read your lips. It depends. So Amy, I know you and I know your context. So if you're a really small organization that you don't have a lot of donors and you're trying to figure out how to do this, some of your round one might be new people. But what we would say to you is do that with people that you're going to meet one-on-one with. These are people you want to see as champions, not a bold, you know, I'm going to go out and hunt for new donors that are going to be my monthly donors, not a campaign of any kind for round one. You want it to be the behind the scenes group that are championing you. So this is where, we call them kind of champions, major donors, anywhere in that, existing donors. You go to them to be able to draw from that. So people that already believe in you, you're not trying to explain your organization. You're saying, hey, we got a great opportunity to build some capacity here. You've believed in us. Would you help us do more of that? So, Amy, in your case, it's very likely we could talk about how that could look. And if you had questions, talk with me and we can talk that through. I would say it's for many of you that I know. Some of you I don't know in your context at all. If you've got donors, start with them. If you've got major donors, start with them. If you've got board members, start with them, because those are the people that are your champions in your organization for round one. So great question. Other questions? Just notice every question is going to be a great question, because I like people that ask questions, because it helps everyone learn.
Heather, when we're filling out the application, can we call you and go, hey, this is what I wrote for this. Does this make sense? Will you kind of help proof that, even if I've gone through my board and said, hey, what do you guys think? Will you, in that process also? Okay.
Yeah, if you're stuck, you can text Jonathan and I, just write it in there. You'll get a much faster response texting, because sometimes we're in meetings and, we're here and there. And we've opened it up to you guys to text us. So you are a priority. We want to see you successful. We want to be responsive to you. So yes, we can proof it if you're unsure, if you want to tweak something. We've talked through the non-consumable a lot with people before they put that in. So if you've got any questions, don't hesitate to ask. So thank you for asking that. We are accessible between now and the magic date, the 19th. So just let us know. Anything else lingering in your mind? It's not a complicated one, but there are these three pieces that, sometimes get confusing to people. And so we just want to let you ask the questions. Go ahead, Steph.
One problem I run into is the nonprofit is what we have created in order to help fund and resource the NGO that we're running. So when we're talking about separate entities or the same entity, almost all of our needs are based on the NGO. Well, the majority of our needs are based on the NGO, not necessarily just on the nonprofit. So in these answers, do I need to keep it cut to the nonprofit, or do I need to, or is it okay to include the things that we're funding in the NGO, such as a bus?
So when you're separating nonprofit and NGO, when NGO is usually more of an international term as non-government organization, how do you distinguish those two? Because in my mind, most of the time I use them interchangeably. So just give me a little bit of your difference.
Yeah, so there's no, the NGO is country-based in Tanzania. There's no ownership by us. There's no, we wrote a bit of a sponsorship agreement, an MOU for them, but we're not, we have no ownership. Yet we are helping them, and eventually we'll take our hands off 5, 10 years later. So what I want to know is, with this capacity building, or even in the writing of how we're going to do this, or, what do I have to separate what we're trying to raise for the NGO as compared to the nonprofit? Because really the nonprofit is just a flow through.
Right. Yeah. I get what you're saying. So the NGO you're referring to is not you, it's an other. It's who you typically grant money to, or you gift money to, so they can do these programs. But you exist to gift money specifically to these kinds of different groups to do that. So I wouldn't confuse the language of NGO. You're raising money for this thing, whether or not people understand the relationship or not. You can talk about a bus that you're raising money to be able to gift to another group, because that's how you function. So we can talk a little bit more specifically about that. I think you're the only one in this group that has that unique, basically you're a funding group, funding great work outside that's not you.
Yeah,
That's other people.
It's other things as well besides funds. The funds is just a part of it, but there's that's
A
one
big
piece
part.
of it.
Yeah, it's a part of it.
It is. And that's why we
Yeah.
need the money.
Yeah, and so you can absolutely do that, and you don't have to separate that. I just wouldn't bring that into your language. I would keep it
Okay.
simple for your donors, and then there's other ways you can communicate integriously what you're doing, and they will know. If they know you, they know that. So
Mhm.
yeah.
So
good question.
will it pique their interest or cause a question if we like it's a school, the project is a school, Mizpah Health Institute, if we put that name in there that we're building this, that's not going to like raise a flag for them or cause a question. Is it?
Again, it really depends upon what they already know, what they don't know, and I'd be glad to talk in more detail with you about that, because I think there's a good way to do that. You're not the only one. There's a lot of organizations doing that kind of work, but you want to inform your donor and you want to make it so they aren't spending extra calories trying to understand that context. So you're
Okay.
keeping it simple while being consistent and full of integrity. Yeah, good.
Okay. So do I
Good
just
example.
schedule a one-on-one then before
Sure, yeah.
Friday to
You can do
run
that, or
through some of those things?
yeah, and we've got till next Friday. Yeah, so we've got between now and next Friday. So yeah, absolutely. I'll fill a time when you can do. You can always go to Venture 9 under coaching. Jonathan and I both have Calendly schedules there that you can
Okay.
just fill in and do that.
Okay.
I would say on this, we haven't said it, but because of the nature of who you all are and who we all are, be prayerful about your plan. I mean, it's kind of an obvious given, but sometimes we do mental work and we forget, that God has of you and he can give us great wisdom in the things that we are doing. So just want to really highlight that, to take time to pray. Ideas that are born in sitting with God are always way better than the ones born in our own brain. So, don't miss that as part of this process as well. And invite people into that kind of a thing. All right, tip 4, we're almost near the end. I'm going to hit this fast, is being realistic about it. Don't overcommit and under-deliver. That's like funders' nightmares. You want to be realistic, and you want to demonstrate that realistic nature by having some data that builds confidence. And we've given some examples. Like if you say, hey, we currently have 12 very committed donors. It's not a lot. It's very open, honest. It says who you are. And you say, we plan to talk to 4 of them, and we're going to offer them the chance to give 200, 500, and 1,000 that will help us, at least reach or exceed this goal. So I'm giving some specifics of who we are, give them some data. We did our first fundraising campaign to attract new donors last year. So you're being personable, giving them data, not just answering questions. It's like you're opening up yourself for someone to understand who you really are. You're not trying to just put your best foot forward. This is where the dating analogy is bad, because you don't want to just make yourself look great. You want to share who you are. And then here, it's like they can say, here's an example. It's realistic for us to expect we can get 10 new donors because we've got 300 followers on our social media platforms. We're asking 12 committed donors to share this opportunity with their friend. So I made all this up. This was not real. And we're going to participate in the Giving Tuesday. So these are information that's based on who you actually are. That gives confidence that you're being realistic. This is another example of a person that gave some background when it came to the non-consumable. And I'll send you this deck so you can have it. But it costs this in order to get a new area director. Now notice, if you multiply that times 3, it's going to be over 10 grand. So their goal was to raise 10,500 in order to, what their goal was to get these area directors ready earlier. Instead of them raising their own money, they could get 3 new area directors launched at the end of that year. And then they said, here's the impact. If we do this, typically they work with 15 churches. We know that from our annual survey. On an average, churches get 11 men discipled in the first year, which is 165. What I didn't write there is he wrote that, within 3 years, they work with 50 churches, and they have for a total of, in the first 3 years, if you multiply that all out, they're working with 35 men from each church by then. It's over 5,000 men at the end of 2023. So they've given some stats that are realistic because all the numbers match. So that's what you want to, say is these numbers match. And so the last one here is be true to your calling. One of the things that foundations, it's a weird dance. Foundations have their thing they like. And sometimes they'll push back and they'll ask you to do something. Well, we would fund you if you would just do this. And you're like, gosh, that sounds great, but that's just not who we are. It's interesting. Foundations actually like people who stay true to their calling. So sometimes saying no to a group catches their peak because most people are just like, I want money. They're just looking for money. And I've seen this happen over and over again. People who've said no, weeks, months, years later, those same funders come back. They hear about them. They know they're on their radar. They watch them and they go, we really want to fund you. Maybe we can make an adjustment. And we've seen that with big funders as well as small funders. So be true to who God has called you to be. Help them understand why what you're doing is important, that this is why you're doing what you're doing. What happens if we don't do it? What happens if we do it? And so that way they understand why you are, because donors have great ideas, but not all of them, as you all know, are practical. So stay true to who God's called you to be. And then whenever possible, just say thank you. A thank you goes such a long way to make a great impression. Just who we are. It's relational. It's thank you for this opportunity, for reading my application. Thank you for your heart to give to, Christian nonprofits. Anything like that is a way for you to just be appreciative. And that shows relationship. It shows sincerity. All of that. And then I love to say, even if you don't get funded in any application, always go back and ask for feedback. Because number one, it tells them you're a learner. And even if you didn't get it this time, you might get it next time. And it's a great way for you to learn from it. It takes away that fear of rejection. So a few common mistakes. If an application is unclear, confusing, again, mental calories, not helpful. If it's not well thought through, if there's basic spelling grammar problems, if there's too much information that they are overwhelmed, the numbers don't match. I'd say this is huge for many of these funders. They're all number people. Make sure your numbers match. If it's unrealistic or if there's no sense of significant impact up till this point, whatever that is and that looks like. So that kind of wraps us up. Final checklist, clear, concise, realistic, compelling, sense of urgency. Didn't say anything about that, but that's just impact. Why are we doing this? What's the need? What happens if we don't do this? And spelling, grammar, that kind of thing. So I'm gonna kind of wrap us up here. And if there are some extra questions, you can stay a little bit longer because we want to make sure everyone gets their questions answered. Next Friday is the deadline. And so you can fill it out. Go to that link that Jonathan sent. It's a private link. Don't share it with a bunch of other people. Only share it with people that are applicants to microgrants. And that's where you want to go. So I'm going to stop sharing. And thank you for being a part. Again, we are very accessible. If you have more questions, we want you to succeed. We want you to clearly communicate who you are. So don't hesitate to reach out. Okay, those of you that need to go, let me just pray quickly. And then if you want to stay on and ask more questions, you can. Otherwise, you can go. Father, you know each and every person here, and you know what you've called them to, what their heart shares of your heart, of brokenness in the world, needs in the world. Lord, you are the God who provides and you open doors. And I thank you for connecting us that we could be together here today. And I pray for clarity of thinking, clarity of mind. I pray, God, that you would give each one just excitement for communicating who they are to new people and that opportunity that's sitting in front of them. Lord, any anxiety, any fears, Lord, I pray you would just bring peace to that and you would bring calm. That this is an opportunity that is for that you want to extend, that you want to open a door to. And I'm just praying, Lord, that for each one here, that they feel supported as a result and not like another thing is added to my list of things to do. So, Lord, give them wisdom as they fill out the application and just bless them for the time they've invested already, even around this microgrant. Bless them in returning time and energy, confidence to them, just your affirmation of who they are and what they're doing. I pray this in your great name, Jesus. Amen. Thank you all, everyone. Good to see you again today. Feel free to unmute or jump in with questions. I'll just sit here for a little while. And there's usually people that are onlookers because they're waiting for someone to ask a great question.
I had thrown a question in there back when you were
Nice.
on that tip for number 4. But it was just like, again, we don't have a lot of monthly donors. We're primarily like founder funded. A lot of this is still founder funded, although we've grown that program a little bit since the last time I talked to you. But I think most of our, my anticipation for that would be from like maybe strong partners. We have a lot of strong partners. We have a lot of really people who are invested in our work, but they're not fiscal partners. They're just people who support us through exchange of services and work in the community. So would that be something that maybe would be more applicable for that first phase?
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons we use the word champion, because
Yeah.
if they're not a fiscal partner, but they absolutely believe in you, you're in essence, and we'll talk about this as we get closer to the one thing I didn't say that is really important is when you write this application kind of is your commitment to what you're going to do.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like that's why the importance of thinking it through is now. But there is flexibility in that. Every donor that talks to us knows that everyone's building capacity. So there's God moments that something completely shifts. And we've had that happen probably maybe only a handful of times where what someone wrote they were gonna do didn't do it at all because God did a big shift in their championship group. Like their board said, we want to do it this way, and which was totally different than what they wrote. So there is a commitment when you write applications, and for many applications, you are held to that. That's you're committed to doing. And if they grant you, that's what they expect. But most of them are not capacity building like we are. So there's flexibility here in that. So Amy, I'd say the best if you go, we want to reach out to our champion partners. You don't have to say who they are.
Hmm.
When you get accepted and we start talking about round 1 messaging, that's when you can nuance a lot of that and you go, who do we reach out to? How do we reach out to them? So right now you don't have to have your list. Just make it, generic. Our champions, our partners, people who know us, love us, believe in us, that kind of thing is you're just saying, this is from the inside of the organization. And the fun part about this is it's kind of like you're widening your group of people that care about getting funds and getting donors to your organization. You're inviting them to be a part of that process. And some people will go, oh, I can't do that. They'll freak out. And some people are like, oh, I've been waiting for you to ask me, because they really want you to succeed and they have ideas. So it'll be it's an interesting part of the process. So did I answer that clearly
Yeah.
enough?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
champions, think about it that way. Mhm. Great questions. Keep them coming.
I have, Heather, I'm wondering what I want to do. The project is to add staff because I'm just work alone right now and I want to add an executive assistant. but I need to do that before December. And so does that work, or can I not do that? I mean, part of it for me is I can't in good faith hire someone now if I don't have enough in reserve, to even just to look forward, to add that to the budget for the future. But I know that it'll, by the time, if I did get the grant, it would exist, they would exist as a position, hopefully already.
Yeah. And that has happened a couple other times. I think what I would say to you, just for your own benefit, is if you can do it, if you think if for some reason I don't get accepted, you could run this same kind of a program without that 2,500, or you could go to somebody and say, would you put up the initial 25? I'll raise the next and we'll do the same thing on our own. So if this is something you feel like I have to do, but I need something behind me, the question is, number one, do you have enough in reserve in case you don't get accepted? Go for it. If you're committed to getting this done and you feel led by God, go for it. Do it. Daniel and Tatiana, they've got donations and stuff they've asked already. We've got these things happening before we even find out if we're accepted. Would this be accepted? So we want you to, so if you start doing a few things to raise $2,500 right now using micro grant, I would just be honest and say, we've been invited, we are looking, we think that we're going to be, would you be a part of this? Even if we don't get accepted by that, we need to raise this for this thing. And you can use the language around micro grant right now because you got stuff to do. So just find a way to be full of integrity and don't overcommit yourself and sink your own ship.
Yes. But you're saying that I could still use that even if I've gone ahead. If I can figure out, hey, do I have the integrity to invite someone in?
Yeah.
Do I have enough?
And just, you won't get that 2,500 from the donor until the celebration.
Right.
So there's a delay of when you get that money.
Exactly.
And when you start raising money, I mean, Jonathan said, the matching part, he said, they don't have to give until the end, which is true, or they could give right away.
Right.
Some people, it's like, once they made a decision, they're ready to give. Don't say no. Don't say wait. Just say yes. Because
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, do it. Anyone else? People are staying on because I just want to hear what the other questions are. Because sometimes it's hard to think about what questions do I have.
I'm all about being a student.
You learn a lot being a student. I learn a lot from every group that comes through here. It's been fun because everyone's a little different.
So I have a question. This is a pretty short application and it's more focused on 13, 14, and 15, where it's the plan. But in the presentation you just did, you talked quite a bit about impacts. So are you wanting us to focus on what the impact of being part of the micro grant is, or what the impact of our nonprofit work is in the application?
Yeah, that's a great question, Daniel. Love it. If it was me, in the first question about being Christ-centered, great nonprofit work that you do, there I would include a sentence that's well worded around the great impact your nonprofit does. So I would do it there because that says who you are. And if you don't put an impact in there, they don't know what you're accomplishing yet. So I think I would include a statement of impact there for the whole organization. When you talk about the non-consumable, or you're talking about, really the non-consumable is the place to talk about the impact of the micro grant and to say, this is what we're going to raise money for. If it's a bus that's going to be in Tanzania, why is a bus needed? What will that help accomplish? What will that do for that group? How will that help make a difference? And so that's where you want to talk about the impact of the other. Good question. Love it.
So I want to say that in in the non-Christian sector, and this goes to limiting the details or being really clear, but also not creating questions. There's a lot of, they want to know the details about, how do you know they need compassionate care? Or that it's, how do you know it's not there? Well, there's not been any research done. So we actually have a guy there doing research now. But if you
Mm.
talk to anyone, either working in the system or not, they'll all say it is very harsh. And so when those are sort of known in that environment, but not here, what we've had to do is use data, from what research we can find that then becomes numbers, and it's a lot then it becomes very wordy and too
Mhm.
much detail. So I guess I'm wanting to know with this particular application, is it accepted that the values and virtues of our faith stand on their own in terms of proof and why it's important?
Yeah. So yes, I think if you can just allude to that, in a simple way, the best thing for an application like this, particularly that's really scaled back, is you have kind of warm givers. They know Venture 9, they know what the past has been like. And if what you're doing in general sounds like something they're interested in, the word Tanzania is going to pop their head, the word, compassionate, things will catch people's attention. So, in Daniel and Tatiana's, it's like what's happening in Ukraine. If someone cares about that, that's going to catch their attention. It's not going to be the fine details. So you do have a common faith here. And so I wouldn't spend as much time trying to validate, if I'm understanding you correctly, the need for the work with our foundations of our faith. But to be able to say, here in one sentence, here's the gap in Tanzania. Here's what we've seen. And it's simple, not, like when I said there's 1.5 million nonprofits, that captures someone's attention and goes, oh, I didn't know that. It's not confusing, not complicated. It's just a fact. And usually people aren't going to argue with something like that, especially if I put where I found that fact. So something simple, it validates, but I wouldn't spend your energy with a lot.
Okay.
Is that answering that question?
Yeah, it does. I just feel like there's a
Okay.
lot of those types of things that I have. So what I thought might be a more confident answer in my 1 to 5. How confident do I feel? I feel like the more you talk about it, the less I feel confident. So we filled one out before joining the class this week, and just the Christ-centered question. Is it fair to ask you, can you take a look at that and say, you're almost there, you've got a long way to go, this is what you need?
Yeah.
Or
Write me an email and ask me to do that. I've got a bunch of short follow-up meetings today. So just write me an email, ask me to do that, and I'll definitely take a look at that and give you feedback on it. Yeah.
Okay. All
No
right.
problem.
Thank you, Heather.
Anything else? A lot of students today, a lot of people willing to listen and hear from and learn from each other.
I don't have question, but I feel this encouragement to all of us that, being missionary for so long, I always saw God's provision and his faithfulness in the financial sphere. This feels very exciting to see his provision once again. So I just want for all of us to understand that God is the one who is the source. And just let's be excited about his faithfulness in this process. And we learn, and he's faithful in his It's just, I don't have questions. This is all I wanted to say. I just like,
I love it.
I
Yeah,
mean,
you're an encourager.
you
I love that about you, Tatiana. And I almost cry because I met Tatiana when she was 18 and she and I couldn't speak each other's language. And
I
here
think
she is.
I say 16 maybe even.
Were you 16?
I think.
Yeah. Okay. It was 16. So she's grown up a lot and she speaks English really well. And and that makes me teary just to think about. Yeah, I was probably only 17 when I met you too, right? No, I'm kidding. Anyway, I agree. And one of the things that I would say is last year's group struggled a lot. There were, well, not all of them. There were more people that struggled last year than we've ever had. And it was because there were so many big things in those people in those organizations going on at the same time. And I mean, to be honest, Jonathan and I thought, I don't know how this is going to happen. It just not look, I mean, it was chaos for 2 organizations particularly. And what you just said happened exactly. No explanation. God did some things and they hit the deadlines even. They didn't even miss the deadlines. Sometimes we'll extend the deadlines when the need has happened. I mean, one organization, they got completely hacked. All their money taken out of their bank account. I mean, it was bad. That was the first year. So we extended their time, but the other people last year, God did miraculous things that enabled them because they were being faithful to show up and to try, and even one of them, she got pregnant. She had been pregnant, been trying forever and ever. And, then she was morning sickness. I mean, it was just complicated and work things happened. And we're thinking that this is not going to happen. And then God just did some surprising things at the very end. So he is the provider and we're learning some new skills so we can, cooperate with him, be a part of that. But I'm confident that he'll do it again as he always has. Thank you for your word of encouragement. All right. If nothing else, last call. Good word of encouragement. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest
Thank
of your
you.
day.